tonight we're going to talk about something that I'm pretty passionate about, of course, which is emotional wellness, but we want to talk a little bit about MS fatigue. I want to thank Viatris for their sponsorship of this program. So we're going to, talk today about helping MS fatigue with emotional wellness. And so can emotional wellness fix fatigue? Goodness gracious, no, it cannot fix it, because if it could, I would have fixed it a long time ago for me, myself, and so many other people, but it can help it. And I think that's important. So, so we're going to talk a little bit today about like how emotional wellness can positively influence MS-related fatigue. And so this is going to be an important conversation because you're going to learn things that you can control that might help support fatigue management or might help support. Because what I do know, and I want you to think about this, is that when your stress is high or you are not feeling well mentally, is your fatigue possibly worse? For me, yes, absolutely, because it touches other things. So we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about fatigue for a moment. So, fatigue is a common and, often invisible symptom of MS. I feel like sometimes my husband can pick up on that, but generally, it can be invisible. And MS fatigue is not just feeling tired. It's really a profound lack of energy, and this interferes with a lot of our daily functioning. And it's one of the most common MS symptoms, affecting up to 80% of people with MS. Now, I share this to be very honest. I didn't have fatigue when I was first diagnosed. It took a couple of years for fatigue to kick in for me, but I will cherish those years that I didn't know what fatigue was. Fatigue can be physical, mental, or both. And often it can worsen with heat stress or after exerting yourself some. And it's a different type of fatigue than experienced by other people. It's more intense usually, and it's less responsive to rest. Rest can help support it, but it's less responsive. Like you may have mental fatigue or physical fatigue, rest a little bit, feel a little bit better, but you might still continue to have fatigue. So we'll move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk about understanding emotional wellness. So emotional wellness is the ability to process and manage your emotions effectively. And it includes resilience, it includes stress management, it also includes a healthy self-expression of your emotions. And this plays a really critical role in how your body copes with disease, including your energy levels. So this is not always about like being happy. It's about staying balanced and self-aware. So you can already see there's a connection, at least with emotional wellness and fatigue. And so for today, we're going to move on to our next slide. We're going to learn about how this impacts, what the connection is like, how one impacts the other, and how to understand the mind and body connection and the fatigue emotion cycle. We're going to talk about some daily things that we can do to support mental well-being that can kind of help with energy conservation. And then we're going to leave with a couple of tools that we can try. And some of these tools you know, some of these tools you might not know. Okay, we'll move on. So we're going to talk about MS between mental health and MS fatigue. So MS, as you know, damages the myelin sheath in our brain, or the coating that covers our nerves. And this disrupts the nerve signal and requiring more energy to function. So I used to explain this to my son, how when he was very young, he's almost 18 now. If you've been with me for a long time, you know you've been with me from my son growing up. But I remember when he was little, I would tell him that I had little holes on the little nerves on my brain, and so it took a lot more energy for my signals to get from my brain to my body, or my brain to the words to come out of my mouth. It took a little bit harder. So your brain works essentially harder to complete simple tasks, and this is part of a contributor to exhaustion. And then inflammation and immune activity also drains the body's reserves. And so this is why fatigue is a natural part of MS often. So we'll move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about the stress response in MS. So chronic stress activates the fight or flight system. If you're new to the MS mental wellness chat, do know that we talk about stress management and we talk about stress in MS because it's an important topic. But when your fight or flight system is activated, this releases cortisol and adrenaline. And if you have a prolonged experience of stress, then this is going to consume a lot of energy and weakens your coping mechanisms. It makes it harder to practice those really healthy coping mechanisms when you're really struggling. And then stress can also, already worsen other symptoms with your MS. And so this kind of causes like a ripple effect, essentially. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about anxiety, depression, and fatigue. And I want you to stay posted and hang tight because we're going to get to a lot of strategies. So this is just kind of talking about the connection of it. So with anxiety, depression, and fatigue, mental health diagnosis or issues like depression and anxiety are very common in MS. They're treatable, but they are common. And they're often underdiagnosed. And that's a big part of this mental wellness chat is that we talk about identifying symptoms, talking to our doctors about things that we're experiencing because it is often misdiagnosed. And these things can cause lack of motivation. They can change your focus and also alter your physical stamina. And so fatigue can be both a symptom or a contributor to mood changes or mood disorders. So if you have MS and have fatigue from that, and you have depression, you have a little bit of double fatigue almost. So we'll move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about how fatigue can trigger frustration, sadness, isolation. So I want you to, Joe asked if I could send the slides. What I can do, Joe, is I can ask if we can get the slides to you. If not, please know that this is being recorded and this will be available, but I will see if we can get the slides to you. So the fatigue emotion cycle, there is a cycle to this. So I'm going to ask you, I don't have a slide for this. How do you feel when you feel fatigued? I feel frustrated a lot of times because it's in the middle when I need to do things or I feel guilty because I need to step back and take care of myself. So if you have an emotional response to fatigue, please share it. But when you're experiencing fatigue, you can experience frustration, sadness, feelings of isolation. There's been times when my son was really little that I remember didn't quite feel isolation, but I felt sad because my husband could go play basketball with him outside and I could hear it, but I needed to rest and I was building my energy. There was reasons, I was kind to myself, but it was hard. So we have Joe, Joe asked for the slides. We have Dion says, I can be irritable. Absolutely. Rick can feel like a failure. And I've heard that before from people. And Joe says it's like a rabbit hole of darkness. Absolutely. And so when you're in emotional distress, it can also heighten your state of fatigue. And so I'm hoping I'm drawing like a connection a little bit that like when stress is high, when our moods are impacted, it increases fatigue. And so really learning how to break the cycle really starts with awareness and physical and emotional interventions, which we're going to talk about a little bit. Barbara says can feel depressed and so sad. David said bothered. Amelia says, yes, I feel guilty, which leads to depression, and I know I get irritable. And Kenneth says, if we don't take proper care of ourselves, we won't be able to for those that we care about. Absolutely. And we're going to focus a lot on taking care of ourselves. But it's hard, this cycle. I know as a therapist and helping people, how do you break this cycle? So we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about research. Sorry, I forgot about this question. Oh, and real quick, go back to the question. one slide. The it's the one with the picture there. Sorry, Bill's helping me out. Okay, so quick note, tonight, if you look outside around sunset, you will be able to see Jupiter and the moon really close together. So that was a picture that I wanted to share just to remind you if you want to see something beautiful. Okay, so going to the question, can you see fatigue and emotional, see a connection between the two? Like when you're not feeling as good, or if your fatigue is higher, can you see that connection? Joanna says, after I have a seizure, I cry for no reason. And there could probably be a lot of reasons why that happens. I mean, even just the emotional release of knowing what just happened, possibly. Kenneth says, no shame in doing what we need to do. There's no shame in doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. Barbara said, wow, probably from the picture. Julie says, hi, Julie from California, not new. Julie, thank you for joining us. Tamikio says, yes, I'm going through a fatigue phase right now. How do you get out of it? We're going to talk about some interventions. For many people, you can't just get rid of fatigue. There's things that you can do to help it and to support it, and I want you to talk with your doctor more than anything. Barbara says, most definitely, and then Rick says, lots of crying. So here we see that some people can see the connection, the emotional fatigue, and I'm sorry, the fatigue and emotional wellness connection. Let's go on to the next slide. So up to 90% of people with MS experience fatigue. I think I read somewhere 80% as well not long ago. Mental health interventions reduce fatigue scores. So we do see that. So we see that if we're implementing mental health prevention or interventions, we can reduce some of the fatigue scores. And then the mind-body approaches show promises in studies. So emotional wellness programs have been shown to improve both mood and energy in MS. And it's also true that people that have depression show a higher rate of fatigue scores. And you possibly could see a 40% improvement if it's depression focused fatigue, you could see some results in that with cognitive behavioral therapy or other therapies. So we're going to now move on to the second part of the program tonight, which is energizing your day through mental wellness strategies. We will Rhonda says, I realize, let's see, I realized that I went through what I just went through is causing today's drowsiness. Yeah, when it's, and then Barbara says, when it's really bad, I end up crying and pitying myself. It's hard to be in these places. So I want to normalize that this happens sometimes, but now I want to talk about like what can we do to help us now that we know that there's some positive things that we can do. So the first one is mindfulness-based techniques. Or actually, I'm sorry, this is just the general. So we're going to talk a little bit about like how emotional wellness reduces the internal drain and preserves energy for what matters. And then positive states, like, so we've talked about hope before, we've talked about calm, and we definitely have talked about connection, support a better immune system. And so we're going to talk a little bit next about mindfulness-based interventions, and we'll move to the next slide. So mindfulness is really about being present. And this in itself can reduce anxiety about future limitations or past struggles because it allows you to be in the moment. And it reduces the cognitive load and can really help with clarity. And so we can find with mindfulness that we reduce our overthinking and it allows us to sort of be in the present. So one of the mindfulness exercises that I like, it's a very quick one. There's a lot of different ones, but this one is it's very, I think, very easy. So it's just breathing. We'll talk about breathing later in the presentation too. But when you're breathing, if you're focusing on your breath in, so say that you inhale for a count of 3 and you exhale for a count of 6, and we're going to hold it for a count of 3. So you inhale for 2, 3, then you exhale. I'm sorry, goodness gracious. You inhale for 2, 3, you hold it for 2, 3, and then you exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more time. You inhale for 2, 3, you hold it for 2, 3. You exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just by focusing on that, you're practicing mindfulness. That's just one example, but mindfulness can be very helpful. Kenneth here says fatigue leads to isolation and isolation leads to depression. Absolutely. You see all these connections. So we're going to move on to our next strategy. And we're going to talk about gratitude. This is not new if you know me. I love gratitude because it really can change how we see things. So noticing, when you notice the small things, this can shift your mental and emotional energy. And it helps you to keep focus on what's working rather than what's not. It's sort of like, it's not a Pollyanna-esque way, but it's looking at things with, like a glass half full instead of a glass half empty. Like you're able to look at it from a different perspective. And even if you practice this for 1 to 2 minutes a day, this can help to foster resilience. So another way, and I forget who is the person that shared this, but I share it now with other people. Another way to think about this is glimmering. I thought it was such a cool word. So what are the things that glimmer for you throughout the, throughout your day? What were the little things that sparkled for you, or felt good, or felt nice? And those things can really, really help make a big deal. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to also talk about setting realistic expectations. Because when we are overscheduled, overcommitted, this really hurts fatigue, doesn't it? And so for this, setting realistic expectations can allow us to avoid burnout. It also creates room for flexibility. If every minute of our day or every moment is filled, any moment that we have energy is filled with something, some sort of task, then we have no flexibility to pivot or make changes. And it also reduces guilt around rest. So avoiding burnout by acknowledging your current energy limits. There is something called the spoon theory, and I've talked about the spoon theory a lot, but I'm just going to say it like 3 times. Spoon theory. So like a spoon, the theory. You can look it up, but it's a great way to kind of look at like how you manage and explain your energy limits. And it's important to know how to talk about them. If I end up being able to get this PowerPoint out to everyone, I'll include the spoon theory with it. So also another strategy here is celebrating doing something, even if it's less than you hoped. We talked a little bit about the reframing. Instead of the to-do list, having an I did list, things that you did. But when you have realistic goals, this can build momentum and also reduce guilt. So realistic expectations can be very helpful. We'll move on to our next slide, which is about pacing and planning your day. So planning your tasks around your peak energy times. So for example, if you're a morning person, I'm not, but if you're a morning person, this is the best time for you to do the majority of things when you have the most energy. If you're a evening person, that is the same as well. But also using energy logs or planners to kind of track your fatigue. Now we are, and you are the expert of your fatigue. And so this is so important to know. you understand when, like, how your fatigue dips, or if you're new to MS, you'll sort of learn these relationships. But it's important to know that you are the expert in your fatigue, and finding the patterns of fatigue, because there are some general patterns. Like, we have someone who talked about that it was humid where she was living and her fatigue has been more today. That's a pattern for a lot of people. Or if you have a really stressful time during work, you'll realize that that might become a pattern as well. So kind of paying attention to the patterns of your fatigue so you can know it and understand it better. And then including rest as a non-negotiable part of your schedule. And this is so hard to do sometimes, I know, because life is busy and we have a lot to do. But I would be remiss if I pretended like that rest was not important. Rest is incredibly important for me. I rested for about 30 minutes before I got ready for this program tonight. And it was to give my brain a rest and my body a rest, and give me a little bit of reserve that I would have for the presentation. And so including that rest does not make you bad, wrong, broken, or anything. It gives you control because it allows you to do more of the things that are important to you. And for me, this mental wellness chat is incredibly important to me. So I want to rest always as I prepare for it. And then there's positive self-talk. So we'll move to that. And this is, next month, we're going to be talking a little bit about self-compassion. But it is so important how we talk to ourselves, because how we talk to ourselves and what we say to ourselves set the tone for how we feel. And if we're harsh to ourselves, then we're going to feel stressed. And that feeling of stress is not going to be energizing. So when we can replace like harsh thoughts with encouragement or kind things, you respond differently. You feel better. It's a little bit more energizing. If you speak kindly to yourself throughout the day, that's gonna, especially on the tough days, that's gonna help too. Your thoughts directly influence your energy and your behavior. And that's important to know. And if we can replace self-criticisms like I'm lazy with I'm doing my best today. If you can do that, that kind of helps to change how you're feeling about yourself and how you're thinking about yourself. And it's really important how we talk to ourselves. We have Kenneth says, a lot of times my wife has to remind me of my fatigue levels. And if you live with fatigue, do you have other people in your life that notice when you're fatigued? I generally, I will, oh, and Jim says, totally agree. It takes an effort to remember that sometimes. Absolutely. You need to be able to be kind to yourself. So sometimes our support partners, people that care about us, our friends, our family, our loved ones, may lean in and say, hey, are you fatigued? Or I'm noticing this. A lot of times for me, and I'll be very honest, is if I'm grumpy, my husband notices. Because that's one of my first signs of being really overly fatigued, is grumpy. So it's important, to have someone in your life. And I want you to, again, look up that spoon theory so you can kind of visualize that with your partner, and so they can understand your energy levels. I think one thing too that can be challenging is, for example, I'll use my husband. Sometimes, we've married for 20 years, and sometimes he forgets that, like, I just don't have his energy levels, and so it's not a competition. He has more energy than me. He wins. He'll stay up later. I'm going to bed, that kind of thing. So it's important to talk about energy, because again, fatigue is invisible, and sometimes your partner will see it because they can see it, and sometimes they don't. We're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about creating a wellness routine. This can be very helpful for fatigue management. So consistently, building small daily habits that build emotional stability. So this might be mindfulness. This might be self-care, like taking a shower, a bath, practicing mindfulness. Maybe giving yourself 5 minutes to sort of just be still. And this can be important. And this wellness routine can support these habits and kind of anchor some emotional stability. Now, is this going to take fatigue away? Again, no, this doesn't fix fatigue. This all helps and supports fatigue to be a little bit better. And then when you have a gentle rhythm, that reduces kind of some daily stress. And also, routine provides structure. And when we have structure, this reduces decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is a real thing. But just as you're thinking about including movement, hydration, quiet time, things that give you joy in your day as a part of your wellness routine. You can think of it like brushing your teeth, or doing something that's as important to you, that building these routines in, and giving them the space that they need can really help support. Joe has a book, has a recommendation. Atomic Habits is a great book on creating habits. And Joe, I am going to support you 1,000,000%. The book Atomic Habits is a great book. There's one quote, and I'm going to say this the wrong way, but I still want to say it. You'll get the essence of it. It's choose one thing, to do one small thing every day that helps you to kind of be the person that you want to be, or to meet the goal that you want to meet. And so for me, with gratitude, one small thing I do a day usually is take a picture, or I choose small things, because the small things add up to be really big things. But Atomic Habits is a really great book as well. And Barbara also says it's a great book. I agree. So you got more than just mine and Joe's recommendation. You got 3 people. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk about connecting with others. And so connecting with others is a part of helping with fatigue, because it helps with your mental energy. So when we have social support, it eases the emotional load. And talking helps us to process our stress. There was something I read the other week that I thought was so true, and it says stress thrives in silence. And so we need to get it out. We need to be able to connect and talk with other people. And community combats isolation fatigue, and being isolated is fatiguing too. And so when you have isolation, this amplifies emotional fatigue. And that's a big part of why this MS Mental Wellness Chat was started, because it was during COVID and people were feeling pretty isolated. And then we realized after COVID, people really could benefit from this program and continue to benefit, because there's still a lot of isolation and a lot of loneliness. So stay connected in small ways with people. This could be through, like, showing up this way is one way of being connected. And I applaud everybody for that this evening. Attending, virtual support groups, texting someone, or having a weekly phone call with a friend or with a connection. And this emotional validation and empathy, when you connect with others, is energizing. Now, I'm going to ask a couple of you that have attended this program or attended the MS Mental Wellness Chat before. Do you guys ever leave? I know it's kind of late sometimes if you're on the East Coast, but do you ever leave this program and feel energized? And I'll answer it for myself, but I would like to hear from the other people in the group. I absolutely leave this program and feel energized sometimes, because you guys really connect and interact with each other and share information and resources. And so sometimes I just feel incredibly connected to all the things that have happened in the chat. And we have, so Joe says, I talk to my sister every Friday because of this program. That is incredible, Joe. And Linda says, energized and validated. And then Pam says, yes, for sure. Barbara says, yes, I feel inspired. Thank you. And David said, definitely. So I just wanted to And then Amelia says it gives me an uplift. So you can see it's the community. It's a sense of community that happens with this group, which is so special. And Terry says she feels distracted and reset, which is awesome. And then Julie says yes. So you can see that connecting with others can be and being able to share, because we talk about heavy things in this chat. It's not all sunshine. It's actually usually based on a hard topic in some way. But at the same time, we're connecting. And because of that, I'm so glad that I can hear from you guys that you feel energized sometimes too, because I absolutely do. Barbara says this is a group where I'm understood, and Carol said yes, understood, and then Rhonda says I feel happy. Thank you guys, like for giving this feedback, and especially for our new people, that they can kind of see how how this really does help. So the next thing we're going to talk about is journaling for emotional clarity. So journaling can be incredibly helpful for you. And again, remember, stress thrives in silence. So we need to get it out. And that might be talking with someone, or it might be journaling. And so journaling helps you to kind of like offload or kind of let go of your mental clutter. And with journaling too, you can start to identify patterns or triggers or things that are going on in your life. You might see that as well as if you're talking with someone or talking to a therapist, etc. And over time, you identify those patterns and triggers, and you might identify some solutions. But people generally feel lighter by writing it out. And so that's really important to know that journaling can have that impact, that you could feel lighter and feel better by writing things out. So we're going to move on to our next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about counseling and therapy. And Dion says she feels in this group understood and validated. Thank you, Dion. So the role of counseling and therapy, how this can help too, is that therapy offers, lots of tools for coping, communication, and can also help with like processing grief or trauma, or even adjusting to a diagnosis, etc. And MS counselors that are trained in MS or understand chronic disease. I'm going to say counselors that understand chronic disease because that's a little bit more common than someone who's specialized in MS. They understand the unique challenges of a chronic illness. And even short-term therapy can be pretty transformative. And therapy, too, I think focuses a lot on not only processing things, but how do you take care of yourself? And it helps you to offload some of those things that maybe are deep on your heart and that you haven't been sharing. And that in itself can help you to feel lighter and feel a little bit better. And emotional clarity can really help our energy levels, because when we are emotionally not doing well, our energy levels are not doing that well either. So we're going to move on to the third part of our program, which is fighting fatigue with relaxation techniques. So why does relaxation matter in MS? And stress really tightens our body and it overstimulates our nervous system. And so relaxation provides, kind of can help you to recalibrate your internal energy balance. And this can help you to improve your mental and physical energy. So, but you want to aim for short, regular moments of calm instead of, I'm going to go get a massage next month. Like a massage is great, but if you get a massage one time a month versus 30 opportunities to write in a journal or practice mindfulness or deep breathing or progressive relaxation, the other things might be more beneficial than just the massage, although the massage will feel amazing. The long-term benefit might be more lasting. So we're going to talk a little bit about deep breathing techniques. We'll move on to our next slide. And so I talked a little bit about, or actually, no, let's talk about this. I have a question for you guys. I always forget, I put in these questions at the end, so I always forget where I plug them in. Is it hard or easy for you to relax? And if it's hard, what helps you? Okay, so Barbara says hard. I think it's hard for me to relax sometimes. And so what helps? What helps me is if I get out of where I am, so if I'm in my office, I go to my screened-in porch. If I'm on my screened-in porch and I can't relax, then I go maybe to this beautiful lake just that's close by my house to look. So we have a lot of people saying hard. Jim says hard, but music helps him. That's awesome. Krista says hard. There are a lot of people that it's hard. Yeah, it's relaxing is kind of tough, isn't it? Julie said easy. Goodness, that is good for you. So finding ways, Krista says music is helpful. Barbara says my mind is always running and it's hard to stop it. John says gardening. Gardening can help. Yeah, that's a really great thing that can help relax. Carol says hard, but TV or reading helps. Melissa says deep breathing and soothing music. So you guys can keep going. We're going to go into the next slide now, and we're going to talk a little bit about deep breathing. So I talked about deep breathing a little bit just a little bit ago. I gave you an example of 3-3-6, but we can also do 4-4-6. But when you breathe and do deep breathing exercises, this is going to automatically slow your heart rate and calm your mind. And it's a quick and portable relaxation tool that you can take with yourself anywhere. I feel like when I am feeling anxious in particular, the one thing I do is deep breathing because it's something that nobody really notices. I can do it if I'm in my car, if I'm in, before a presentation, if I'm feeling stressed in a store or wherever, nobody notices. Linda says she's easily able to relax, but she says I remove myself to calm down. And then Rick says walking on the beach or driftwood. Yeah, absolutely. And then Rhonda says take a walk and sit in a sunny spot. Absolutely. So with deep breathing, this is such a great thing that you can do, and you can use it anytime in the morning, before appointments, or anytime that you're overwhelmed, and you can feel a little bit better, a little bit reset. And this is a little bit energizing. Is it going to fix fatigue? No, I'm going to say that all along, but it's going to help it. Then there's progressive muscle relaxation. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk about that. So when you have a systematic tension release, this can help to identify and reduce hidden tension in your muscles. And this can be done either guided through like an app or audio, or something that you can learn to do by yourself. But I do think the guided progressive relaxation activities to me are a little bit helpful, because I like when someone sort of tells me what to do. But for this, we're going to just we're going to do a sample. So I want you to take your hand, and I want you to tighten a fist, and I want you to keep it tight. Keep your fist really tight, and we're going to keep it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I want you to slowly open your hand if you were able to do that. If you weren't able to do your fists because you're MS, see if you could do like if you could tense your shoulder or shoulders, or tense your foot, etc. But essentially what happens is when you tense the muscle up and then you relax it, it gives your body a sense of relaxation, and it helps to kind of really release some stored physical stress that you have. And it's an increased body awareness too. I highly recommend progressive muscle relaxation, and you can get this like through an app, or even probably on Spotify or Apple Music. I haven't tried that, but I will try that and report back. The next thing is visual and guided imagery. We'll move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk about this because it is equally as energizing. So this is where you can imagine, a peaceful scene, something that energizes you. Maybe, I always deviate to the mountains because the mountains are very peaceful to me, and that's where I feel very calm. A lot of people deviate to the beach and how the beach feels, but it's a place that that works for you, that helps you to mentally escape for a minute. And you may want to think about how things How do things look? You close your eyes and you think, visualize, how do they look there? How do they, how do the things sound around there? What are things like if you were at the beach, like how does the sand feel on your toes, if that's something that feels good, or the wind? And this should help you to mentally escape stress. There's also apps like Calm, the Calm app, I use that quite a bit, and they have some of these visual guided imagery exercises. You probably could Google, and on YouTube definitely get some of these too. But that can really help you, especially if you can't just go to the place in your mind, then the guided piece of it can help give you the things to visualize, and it can be very, very relaxing. And the brain, it's important to know that the brain is going to respond, to real experiences, but your brain responds to this as well. And so this is worth a good try. In therapy, I use it often with people because it could be very helpful. And personally, I still use it myself. So we'll move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about meditation. So meditation is not about emptying the mind, but observing it with no judgment. So even if you're meditating for 2 to 5 minutes a day, this can greatly reduce anxiety and increase clarity. And there's apps and simple breathing exercises that can help you with meditation. Usually, I think everyone is a little bit different in how meditation works for them. I think for me and my screened-in porch, that seems to be the best place for me. And I think it's like any exercise that you do, that it allows you to practice it and get better at it. Terry recommended the body scan. The body scan is a really good thing, and we're going to be talking about it next. Barbara says, I like scenes with water. It soothes me. Yes, a lot of people. And then Joe says also meditation, coloring books can help with meditation. Absolutely. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about body scanning. So body scanning can be incredibly helpful because it helps you to be aware of where you're holding tension. And this combines, like I said, like an awareness and also kind of a release of a tension zone. So like I notice I can do my ears to my shoulders to my ears almost sometimes if I'm feeling stressed. So so if you're doing a body scan, you can notice that, like for me, I'm just making this exaggerated, but notice that my shoulders are really tense. And because the awareness of it, I can kind of relax. Or if I'm clenching my mouth or my teeth, that I can loosen my jaw a little bit. And so you essentially scan all the areas of your body to see where you're holding tension and seeing if you're holding tension, and then you slowly release it. And this is really good to do during rest breaks and before sleep. And this can recenter your body and your mind. Body scanning is a great tool. So the next thing we're going to talk about is nature therapy, and we'll move on to our next slide. So nature therapy is probably one of my favorite things. It's time in nature, either virtually or physically. And this can have like really measurable calming effects. And so this could be listening to a bird song, looking out the window, tending to a plant. Being with nature generally, it can improve your mood and resets an overstimulated brain. Even photos or videos can help. So if you're not able to go outside just easily, there are ways that you can access nature, and by listening to sounds, and looking at pictures on the internet, etc. But nature is important. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the having a daily wellness blueprint. So this is, I'm just going to give you an example. It's thinking about what you can do, like morning, afternoon, and evening, that can kind of help you to manage your stress a little bit and to focus on wellness. And so for the morning, it might be that you, as you're laying in bed, that you are practicing mindful breathing, maybe saying some positive affirmations. We've talked about those many times before. Maybe midday, you're going to take a break. Maybe you're going to rest, or maybe you're going to stretch. or do progressive relaxation or practice gratitude. And in the evening, maybe you're going to reflect, journal, and do a body scanning activity before you go to sleep to help relieve any tension. So the idea of the daily wellness blueprint is to keep it flexible and forgiving, but to have a little bit of structure and to practice if you can. So we'll move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk about overcoming challenges. Because bad days happen, don't they? Hard days happen, and we have to anticipate that they're going to happen. So emotional tools are useful because of them, so they're most useful to use because of the hard days, and it helps when we can apply them. So learning to adapt your plan, to learning how to shorten tasks, lean on support, practicing acceptance of that you may need to practice, so you're kind to yourself and give yourself grace. And knowing that it's consistency over perfection. So building flexibility. And when I say flexibility, it's not stretching, although stretching is good for us. It's really about that mental flexibility that we have to sometimes adapt and pivot. And then celebrating small wins. So we'll move on to the next slide, and we'll talk about every emotional habit is really a step towards strength. So if you've been practicing playing the piano at night, that in itself is a step towards strength. If you're engaging in art, or if you're taking walks, or if you're learning to meditate or breathe, or practicing yoga, there's so many things. Listening to music, just allowing yourself to recognize every effort that you take to take care of yourself. And acknowledging progress, no matter how small. I spoke kindly to myself, for example. If even if that's a really small thing, those things add up and they build momentum. Small changes make really big differences. And that's something that I think is so important for us to remember. And then when we have little wins, guess what? It fuels motivation and resilience. So there's like a win-win here. So we're going to move on to our next slide. And I wanted to ask you, did you have a small win for today? And you may not have a self-care small win because we were just talking about it, but what was your small win today? And let's see if I can think of what my small win is today. I think my small win today was I spent some time looking at pictures, and I've inputted some of these pictures into the presentation because they just made me really happy. Linda says, yes, I drove for the first time in a month. Linda, I know that is a big deal, and that is a big win. A small win, a big win. Krista says, I was able to till the garden. Ooh, I watered my plants today. That was a win too. So thinking about for yourself, and even if you're not apt to sharing it, just remember that small wins make big differences. Kenneth again passed his test, which is amazing. Rick went out to lunch. Anne finally got her registration in Maine taken care of. I know that's been a thing, so that is cool. Amelia said, I remembered to attend this. Yeah, being here. Thank you. That is a small win. Rhonda says, I arrived to class early, today's class early. That's so perfect. So I'm remembering that we all have small little wins, and acknowledging them, sharing them with ourselves is important because that builds your momentum. So we'll move on to our next slide. And so in closing, emotional wellness is energy self-care, if you think about it that way. And it's important to do what works best for you and start small, and really every step counts. And emotional wellness is not a luxury. It's an essential part of MS care. And so it's not when I get to it, I'll take care of myself. No, we've got to take care of ourselves now. And it's important that we we try to practice this, that we practice small things or one new practice a week, or have our little blueprint of what we would like to do to take care of ourselves. Krista said, I was late, but I remembered. But you're here, Krista. That is a win. And we're going to thank Viatris for their sponsorship of this MS Mental Wellness Chat. They've been a sponsor for a good amount of time, and I've been very thankful. And I know MS Views and News, incredibly thankful for them too, for bringing this program to the community many years ago. But thank you to our sponsor. And if you you know me, this is a slide I've been using since the very first program. I don't like to say goodbye, because I like to say I'll see you later, because guess what? Next month we will be here. We will have this community. We're going to have a lot of resources. And so it's not goodbye. See you later. Have a good evening.